In this video, I'm going to explain how it is that you determine if a study is an experiment. So I've seen many different definitions of an experiment in textbooks, and I don't like any of them. So I've come up with my own definition per se for how you determine whether something is an experiment or not. When you're looking at the description of a study, you want to ask yourself these three questions. And if the study meets all three of these criteria, then the study is an experiment. The first criteria: does the study have an independent and a dependent variable? Now, I didn't talk about this in the independent and dependent variable video, but an independent variable is often thought of as the cause, and a dependent variable is often thought of as the effect. Now, I'm going to use these terms kind of loosely because you can't really say something's causal unless it is an experiment. But an independent variable is often thought of as a cause and an effect. So does the study have an independent and dependent variable? If so, then it's met the first criteria. Moving down to the second criteria, does the independent variable have two or more levels or groups? So are we comparing two different types of treatment, for example? Maybe we're comparing a treatment, experimental treatment to a placebo, or we're comparing males to females. All right, so that's two or more levels. If it meets this criteria, then it might be an experiment. And then the last criteria is the one that more often than not, a study is going to violate, which would make it not an experiment. So the third criteria is that the independent variable is under the control of or manipulated by the researcher. So basically what this means is that the researcher is the one that is administering the independent variable. So the person's not just, taking their own treatment, but it's the researcher, him or herself, that's actually giving the participants the treatment. So if the researcher is manipulating, controlling the independent variable, then it meets this criteria. And only if we have met all three of these criteria is something actually an experiment. So to go a little deeper and to make sure that you guys understand what I'm talking about, I want to go back to my example of alcohol and speech. So let's say we're interested in looking at the relationship between alcohol and speech. I have a couple different suggestions of ways that we could actually carry out this study. And so for each one of these, we're going to go through and see, does it meet these three criteria? So let's say we decide to look at alcohol and speech by going into a bar, asking people who are in there how much they had to drink, and then we give them a speech test. So let's say for the speech test, we have them read some tongue twisters, and we count up the number of mistakes they make. So go into a bar, ask people how much they've had to drink, and give them a speech test. Do we have an independent and a dependent variable? Yeah, we clearly do in this study. So we have alcohol, we asked them how much they had to drink, and we gave them a speech test. So we have an independent and a dependent variable. Now, second, do we have two or more levels? Now, it doesn't quite say here. So we may have two or more levels, we may not have two or more levels. Let's assume that some people said they had nothing, some people said, they had 1 drink, 2 drink, 3 drinks. So let's assume that we've met this criteria. All right, so let's assume that we're looking at different levels of alcohol. So far so good. Then we get down to this last criteria: is the independent variable under the control of the researcher? Is it the researcher that's giving the participants the alcohol? Well, clearly in this case, no. We go into a bar, they're just drinking on their own, and we're just asking them to self-report on how much they've had to drink. So we have not met this criteria. So this is not an experiment. All right, let's try this next one. Let's say we bring people into our lab, we give everybody a single beer, and then we give them that same speech test. So do we have an independent and a dependent variable? Yeah, they have alcohol, there's our independent, and our dependent variable is the test. Does the independent variable have two or more levels? We gave everybody a single beer. Did we compare 0 to 1? Did we compare 1 to 2? No, we didn't. So we violated this second criteria. So already we know it's not an experiment, but let's just go down to this last one and see if we've met this one. Is the independent variable being manipulated by the researcher? Yes, it is. It's the researcher that's giving them the alcohol. So we did meet this criteria, but we violated criteria 2. So this one is not an experiment. And then last but not least, we're going to go to this third one. Let's say we bring people into our lab. Let's say we give some people 0 drinks and we give some people 2 drinks, and then we give them that same speech test. Do we have an independent and a dependent variable? Yes, we do. Our independent is alcohol. Our dependent is the test. Does the independent variable have 2 or more levels? Yep. Some people have 0 drinks. Some people have 2 drinks. And is the independent variable being manipulated by or controlled by the researcher? Yes, it is. It's the researcher that gives people the alcohol. So in this example, we have an experiment. All right, so in one of the homeworks, you are going to have to go through several different vignettes of studies to figure out whether some different studies that are described meet these criteria. And remember, it is not an experiment unless it meets all 3 of the criteria.